just even Fox News, if you just take the daytime news reporters, they're very different from the evening, more like entertainers. So I think if you know what you're looking at, but my point is you can't rely on any one source. You have to go to multiple sources, including online sources, and just evaluate them. And there are sites that evaluate the bias, liberal or conservative bias of different media sources. You just have to do that. And NPR, I don't trust so much anymore. AP, Associated Press, I feel is fairly objective about how they present things. No one's completely unbiased, of course, but so multiple sources. I mean, and that now there's so many online. Really, you just have to kind of do a little bit of your own fact checking.
I'm Dave Rubin, and joining me today is the publisher of Skeptic magazine, a presidential fellow at Chapman University, the host of the Michael Shermer Show, and author of the new book, I've got it right here in my hand, Conspiracy: Why the Rational Believe the Irrational. Michael Shermer, welcome back to the Rubin Report.
All right. Nice to see you, Dave. Nice to be back.
It's good to see you, my friend. Now, before I do anything else here, you have one of the largest stacks of books I've ever seen behind you. Is this some kind of ploy, like if there's an earthquake or something, books crash on you, clip goes viral? It's very clever, very clever.
Killed by a conspiracy. By a plethora of conspiracies, yes. It's
crushed by your own conspiracy book. That would be odd. It is good to see you, my friend. We did about 30 seconds before we started recording here, but you have been on this show probably a dozen times in one incarnation or another. And you also have written 400 billion books. I did the math on that. No, what is this for you? This is like 16, 18 for you? What is it?
15th book. Yeah. First real book as Mr. Skeptic was Why People Believe Weird Things, 1997. So I average, like 2 a year, something like that. This conspiracy, last real book was 2018, Heavens on Earth. So it takes me, 3 to 4 years really on average. Was
this a little different? I mean, your books, obviously, they're dense and thoughtful and interesting. And one of the things that I always credit you for is you don't pretend you made up every idea. You credit people accordingly and you call back to people and all sorts of things. But there's a lot of research in this book. You had to dive into a lot of stuff. Does that make it more fun or less fun to write a book where you're unpacking and going across all sorts of mediums to figure out who believes what and why they believe it?
I do like to cite authors that actually do the work, unlike some authors whom I won't name, not you. I mean, there's some academics.
Thank you.
There's some academics that are not especially generous about recognizing where they got that research. There's actually a huge body of literature on conspiracies and conspiracy theories, why people believe them, sociology of it, social psych, cognitive psych, anthropology of beliefs, and so on. There's a lot in there. So I summarize all that, but then try to push the frontiers a little bit with some of my own ideas. I constructed a tripartite, you might call it, or three-legged stool of conspiracism, proxy conspiracism, tribal conspiracism, and constructive conspiracism. So there's kind of an overarching theoretical model that holds together all the different parts. So while most of the details, of course, are other people's research, I've kind of put it all together in an integrative whole under that rubric.
Yeah, and I really liked how you did that. So as you said, there's sort of 3 sections to the book, a prologue that leads into it, but then each one sort of leads into the next one. So I want to get into some of that, but broadly speaking, one of the questions I get the most these days, if I do a public event or if I'm doing a Q&A online or whatever, is people say to me, where do you get your news? How do you know what to believe? And I find it's getting increasingly more difficult to answer that. We're all going into our little ideological echo chambers. I do my best to not be in there all the time, but it's getting tough for everybody. And as I often say, if you're watching MSNBC, you basically live in a different world as the Fox News person. And right. I think everyone right now in a modern sense is struggling with this. So the book for that reason feels very relevant because I think everyone's going through some version of a conspiracy theory to some extent.
Yeah, well, so here's one solution. I actually get print newspapers every day. I get the New York Times, or say the New York Times. Oh, where's my Wall Street Journal? Here's my Wall Street. Okay, I got my Wall Street Journal. Oh, here it is. And the Wall Street Journal. There we go. So I add them up and divide by 2 to get the truth.
So in my estimation, the Wall Street Journal would be far more factual than the New York Times, which I think has gone really off the deep end. As you know, Barry Weiss, they were so out of control that Barry Weiss, as a liberal, felt she couldn't even stay there anymore. Yeah. So when you pick up the New York Times, are you basically going, all right, they screwed this one up. That's a deflection. This is a confusion, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, the Wall Street Journal, separating the opinion section from the news section, they're both biased in each direction that we all know about. And that's true for any of the news sources you might want to name. You have to separate just even Fox News. If you just take the daytime news reporters, they're very different from the evening, more like entertainers. So I think if you know what you're looking at, but my point is you can't rely on any one source. You have to go to multiple sources, including online sources, and just evaluate them. And there are sites that evaluate the bias, liberal or conservative bias of different media sources. And you just have to do that. And NPR, I don't trust so much anymore. AP, Associated Press, I feel is fairly objective about how they present things. No one's completely unbiased, of course, but so multiple sources. I mean, and now there's so many online. Really, you just have to kind of do a little bit of your own fact checking. And if you can do,
Well, isn't that almost one of the biggest problems we have in this technological adolescence that we're in, that the average person, that even if they want to stay informed on current events, what's going on in the world, the economy, whatever it might be, they don't have the time to go, okay, I'm going to read the Times and the Wall Street Journal, and I'll see what they're saying on Fox and MSNBC. And then they just kind of put their hands up and they check out. I think we're getting a lot of that, actually.
So the subtitle of the book, Why the Rational Believe the Irrational. My point is that people that believe conspiracy theories are not tinfoil hat idiots. They're me and you, everybody. Surveys show everybody believes at least one conspiracy theory. And one reason for that is my constructive conspiracism. A lot of them are true. So it pays to be a little constructively paranoid, just in case. But so for the most part, most people are rational about their daily lives. They get the kids off to school, they hold jobs, they keep gas in the tank and food in the fridge, and they have a social life, and they're just normal about things that they could do something about. Now, if you take some of the big conspiracy theories, like the rigged election, say, of 2020, how would I check that to know what's going on? You have to rely on sources that have the resources and access to fact check things like that. I wouldn't even know who to call in Ohio or Georgia or Arizona to ask, what about that truck that pulled up at 3 a.m, because that grainy video was kind of suspicious, So here we rely on people that we should trust, and we have traditionally, maybe not so much anymore. But for me, whatever questions I had were put to rest when Attorney General Bill Barr said, well, we had the entire resources of the Department of Justice, and we looked into it, and we looked here, and we checked that, and so on and so forth, didn't find anything. It's like, okay, well, end of story, as far as I was concerned. Now, it's
what do you say to the people that will go, well, Bill Barr is just part of the machine that would produce that sort of lie? Because that, of course, as you know, you're the expert in this. I mean, conspiracies, they jump from one sort of seeming dead end to a new place, and then a new place and a new place and a new place.
So what do you say? Well, what I say is, well, then who do you trust? What is your source? If you don't trust the entire Department of Justice, if you don't trust the Trump-appointed Attorney General or all the Trump-appointed judges in the cases that he brought before the courts, and so on, who would you trust? And why would you trust somebody else if not them? I like quoting Christopher Hitchens when he says, which he got from somebody else, which was that if you hear the Pope say he believes in God today, you think, well, the Pope's doing his job again today. It's what he's supposed to do. But if you hear the Pope say, I'm beginning to have some doubts about God's existence, you think, he might be onto something, right? So when somebody on your team or somebody you trust says something that you can pretty much count on, if Bill Barr said, hey, I found some suspicion, well, of course he's a Trump-appointed Republican. Maybe we need another source. But if he says, if he would be motivated to find fraud and he didn't, then to me, that ups the probability that there was no fraud in the election. That's just kind of how to think about that kind of conspiracy theory.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about academia instead of nonstop yelling, check out our academia playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, check out our full episode playlist. They're all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.